morning, everybody. Thank you, Justin. So it's my pleasure to kick off the briefing this morning with a look at the Indian market and in particular our forecast. Over 500 aircraft still to be delivered to Indian carriers in the coming years, and combined that gives us over 70% market share of in-service and on-order aircraft. And just to be very clear, this number of market share of more than 70% does not include any Kingfisher orders. So looking at the forecast for the coming 20 years, historically air traffic has doubled every 15 years, and we see air traffic doubling again in the next 15 years, growing at an average annual rate of 4.6%. So this growth leads to a worldwide requirement for around 32,600 new passenger and freighter aircraft over the coming 20 years for a combined value of $4.9 trillion US dollars. These aircraft comprise nearly 23,000 single-aisle aircraft like the A320 family, over 8,100 twin-aisle aircraft like the A330 and the A350, and 1,550 very large aircraft like the A380. Of course, Asia Pacific already today the largest region in terms of air traffic, and we see Asia Pacific extending its lead over Europe and North America significantly over the coming 20 years to more than 1/3 of global traffic. Of course, this leads to a significant requirement for new aircraft, and it means that around 40% of the worldwide demand for new aircraft will go to Asia Pacific, and even around 46% of the world's wide-body requirement. So a strong driver for growth for air traffic worldwide and in Asia in particular is the growth of the middle class. That is the segment of the population that has the disposable income giving access to air travel. 2.7 billion worldwide in 2014, about 1.2 you see in red billion in Asia Pacific, and about 1/3 of those are in India. So we see that the middle class in Asia Pacific growing to about 2 billion in 2024 and over 2.5 billion in 2034, making up more than half of the world's middle class. So very strong growth in the middle class in India, and that's a very important driver for the increase in air traffic. According to Oxford Economics, in 2014, 400 million people in the middle class in India, already significantly more than, for example, in the US, and this will increase over the coming years to around 600 million in 2024. Growing middle class driven by economic growth, and there we see a very healthy picture for India. In 2015, around 7% GDP growth, bringing India above China again in terms of economic growth, and we expect that to continue to be the case in the coming years with a growth of between 7 and 8%. And why GDP growth is so important for air travel growth, you can see on this chart, which is showing the trips per capita, what we call the travel propensity on the vertical axis, as a function of GDP per capita on the horizontal axis. And if you look at the situation in 2014, very similar to today, you see that actually today the Indian population on average takes one trip every 14 years. So you see there's a huge potential for increase in the number of trips per capita in India. And what you see as well is that India on the left-hand side is on a part of the curve where only a small increase in economic growth leads to a very strong increase in air travel. And that is the reason why over the coming years we will see the propensity to travel, the trips per capita in India, quadruple over the coming 20 years. So that is a very strong driver for the traffic growth, the economic growth, the growth of the middle class, the number of trips per people. The average traffic growth combining domestic and international travel over the coming 20 years, we see in our global market forecast at 8.4% per year on average. On the Indian domestic market, we see 9.3% on average per year over the coming 20 years. And this 9.3% actually makes India the fastest growing air travel market in the world that we consider in our global market forecast. And there's more than that. When you look at the chart here, you see India at the top, domestic India, but you also see in the blue bands that 4 out of the top 6 fastest growing flows that we consider in our global market forecast in the world are connecting India. They're involving India. The number of aircraft here that I will give before moving to the forecast for number of aircraft is what we call the aircraft penetration. It's a measure which is the number of aircraft in a country per 1 million people. What you see on the chart is that in the US, for example, this is 12.2. In China today, it's 1.8, so about 8 times less still than in the US. But in India today, it is only 0.3. 6 times less than in China for a similar population. So you can see with 400 aircraft in India today, with China already being at 2,400, there's an enormous... Carriers are expanding internationally and leading to a doubling of the share of wide-body aircraft in the Indian fleet.